Every revolutionary act is an act of love. And this is an act of love.
Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. So we're doing something different this year. You might have noticed if you've been here before. We, a lot of times we get advice about what we're supposed to do, and one of those pieces of advice is that you should really have a keynote speaker. Except at the very beginning when we started this, we had this big thing about no experts and no one person talking at people for the time. So we came up with this idea of a keynote conversation with one of the best conversationalists probably in the world. So I'm counting on him to bring up the average because this is not really my experience. I do a lot more talking at people than I do this kind of stuff. So, but it's okay, we're just gonna talk, right?
I got to tell you, every episode of the Combat Jack Show podcast that I produce, I agonize for hours on end with regard to preparing my questions. Mm-hmm. So it's so relieving to be on stage and not having any questions and not having had to do the work. So this is great.
That makes me feel great.
Yeah. So you got the juice now.
Exactly. It's not so bad though when your research is listening to hours and hours of your podcast. That's not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing, right?
Right. So there are a lot of reasons why we wanted to have Combat Jack or Reggie be the first keynote conversation. I mean, the big one is that you fit. You fit. Your career fits with a lot of people in this room. We've talked a little bit about the fact that you're so honest about things and really transparent about a lot of things, and that's what we try to be here too. That was important for us. And also, we've had a lot of hip-hop folks involved since the very beginning, so that was also another fit. And actually, before we get into the other questions, that was the thing I wanted to continue our conversation from August. You asked me a question, and I never got to ask you the question back. Do you know what question it is?
No, I don't know what the question is.
Top 5 MCs.
My top 5 MCs, I've said this on the show. My top 5 MCs, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, so I'm always going to be partial to the Brooklyn MCs. So it's Jay-Z, Biggie, Big Daddy Kane.
Who's retweeted us once?
Kane's retweeted you guys?
Yeah, somebody from us.
Doom. Only because I that's 4, right? Mm-hmm. Now I'm nervous.
It's just recorded for posterity.
KRS-One.
Okay.
KRS-One, and I factor my top 5 faves on just playability. Mm-hmm. How many times have I played them? How many times have I applied their work or their words to real life situations? Like I remember being in law school and just feeling, just cornered at Georgetown Law and going back to Criminal Minded, going back to KRS and just gaining encouragement and regaining focus through those words. So I say Doom, and when I say Doom, people are like, Doom? I'm like, yeah, because, when I left the music industry 11 years ago, I kind of shut down from everything that was being played on mainstream radio and TV, and I thought, for me, music was dead. Mm. And so I dived into the internet playlist, and Doom was big 10 years ago, and it just gave me a greater sense of hope, a return sense of hope, and return sense of determination that, okay, I'm going to continue doing dope shit for my life.
That's a great thing to get from somebody's art, right?
Yeah, definitely.
For all the artists in the room.
If only all art could be so inspiring.
Yeah, and that residual effect too, where
right.
It comes back in different ways in your life. That's important. There are a couple people in the audience right now wondering, how I answered that question because they don't know that I am a fan.
Right.
They have to have coffee.
She's a fan.
They have to have coffee with me to find out who my top 5 were, and I didn't really answer it right because I'm not ahead.
Okay.
But so we are not going to really talk about hip hop that much,
okay.
unless just in the way that it feeds into different things here. But so one of the things, we touched on, and Kevin did a great job elucidating sort of your path, your career path. So I'm going to just jump briefly to that transition from, we talked a little bit about this, about how you felt about doing law and being successful in a lot of ways, and yet feeling like you wanted to do something different, and then what that different thing was.
So the factors that led to my transition, I had been in the music industry before going to law school, I was a fine arts major at Cornell. And, after my first semester, I realized, or I felt, that I wasn't being challenged enough to be prepared for the real world. And for me, the real world was coming back to Brooklyn, New York in the 80s during the crack era, how I was going to support my family, I'm first generation American by the way of Haiti, so this opportunity to get, be the first to be college educated, and what am I going to do? What am I going to contribute when I get back home? So one day I had the fortune of seeing my cousin was a Park Avenue lawyer, and I accidentally saw his paycheck and I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a lawyer. So that led me into the career of law, and I realized immediately, the first day of law school, that I hated law. I didn't really like my peers, especially the ones that exhibited like reptilian tendencies. So I was like kind of lost, but I was committed. Now I'm at Georgetown Law. I got into my first choice law school. I've got to do this thing. So I hunkered down and I did it. But it was never a sense of like, I'm happy, I'm proud. I'm proud of my accomplishments, but it felt forced. So towards the end of the 90s, the rap music, urban music, the business was booming. And I was like, you know what? That seems like the most perfect fit, taking my skills as a young attorney and applying them in the music industry. So, I was in heaven when I finally got my foot in the door at Def Jam, and I was in the business, and I was meeting my stars, and I was looking over their contracts, and I was good at what I did, but I was doing it out of a sense of, this is my job. This is my work. And you psych yourself, I'm a lawyer, like I'm a good lawyer, I'm a lawyer. But there was always this voice that you're not really a lawyer. And then there's these fears that start popping up about waiting for when people were going to discover that I was a fraud. Even though I had done everything I deserved I deserved everything that I got, but I just felt like a fraud. And, so mistakes happen when your mind's not into it, your heart's not into it. Just the competitive nature of the industry itself, working very hard with artists that no one's paying attention to, and investing years of your life and your resources into their career. And then when they blow, when they're on the pop charts and their records are playing, that anxiety that, okay, now I've got to do my best to make sure that I keep this person as my client. Because now other attorneys, bigger, firms with deep war chests start, start going for your client. And I didn't want to live that life anymore. So I remember it was like towards the end of the 90s, I hired a young attorney. And this guy was just so passionate about his law practice, about the craft, about making deals. And the more I saw how passionate he was, the more depressed I became. Because I was like, I'm not as passionate as him. The guy was so grateful. He's like, thanks, Reggie, for hiring me, and we're going to make this the biggest firm. And he's like just the most gung-ho foot soldier you could ever have. And just seeing him being so pure and energetic and passionate, I was like, I got to leave. Because I have to find what I'm as passionate about. Because he was alive and I felt that I was dying. So I was getting older. I was looking at 40. My wife and I had just had our third child, and I was like, in hip hop sense, I'm old, but there's a good 30, 40 more years, and I don't want to be unhappy.
Yeah, right.
So it was a process. It was like a 5-year process. The fear of what my peers are going to think, because in the professional world, you work so hard to create an image and perfect your brand. And, you don't want to be an attorney. What are you going to do? Just that thing. And then the fear of the real world, like, how am I going to pay my bills? I don't have any, there's no job for someone that leaves their career to start a new career that they don't know what career that is. Yeah. There's no job.
But I bet there's some kindred spirits here in this room. If you let us know, or a few people here who have done that. But
I guess what was pulling me is like, so this guy is really passionate, but at the same time, it's like, you have passion. I have passion. I know what I'm passionate about. I don't know what it is, but I want to express myself.
Yeah.
And it was that point where I remember the last thing was I had done my biggest deal. I flew out to LA, it was post 9/11. So flying was kind of, it was just a lot of energy in the air. I had closed my biggest deal and I was flying from LA back to New York and I was the saddest. I was just like, I can't do this. And I got home and I was like, honey, I'm out. I'm out. So I determined to close my practice December 31st, 2004, which I did. And then there was some satisfaction in terms of letting go of my asshole clients. Like they're complaining about billable hours, and I'm like, dude, you're fired. And then, it's like, and then so I had successfully walked away from my practice, and I woke up on January 1st, 2004, and I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? I was back to ground zero. And that's when the fun started. So.
There's a million things in there right there. I mean, first of all, that last question was one of the original questions of how Manifest and I started Giant Steps. That thing when you wake up in the middle of the night and like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
It was definitely part of why we wanted to start these conversations. I think also, I don't know, this for me was a big deal, was understanding the difference between like being good at something and being passionate about something. And I think as a young person, I had sort of mixed those two things together a lot. And then once you find out that they're not the same, then you can't do what you're doing, even if you are good at it, right?
Yeah, I mean, being good at something, I mean, there's different levels and there's different connotations to what being good at something is. But applying it to this conversation, your work, you learn to be good. It's practice.
Right.
But what you're passionate about, I just had a keynote speech yesterday at Morehouse, and I was looking at all these young faces, and, in hip-hop or in the business world, there's this concept of the hustle. There's this concept of the grind. We don't sleep. Like this, we're going to toil, and we're going to achieve success, and we're going to continue to toil. And yes, you have to exert that type of energy in terms of anything, relationships, work, career, your art, whatever it is. But at the same time, if all you're going to do is hustle and grind, that doesn't sound fun.
No.
That's exhausting.
And it's not,
you burn out.
And you're not even necessarily, as like I think Laura Zabel said earlier, like just because you're toiling doesn't mean you're actually doing the work, right?
No, you're
like,
toiling.
It's not, yeah, exactly. Like you're just working yourself to death.
So recently there's been this talk about not work harder, work smarter, right? And I found over the years, past recent years, that the work I do, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But I don't feel like I'm grinding. I don't feel like I'm toiling. I don't feel like I'm pushing. I feel like I'm being pulled.
Yes.
And I'd rather be on the other side of momentum. I'd rather be being pulled than having to push.
And I don't know if you've found this, but we've talked a little bit about well-being stuff too. But for me, the hours have definitely not changed. The risk is the same or higher, but it's but like my body has reacted differently. I was sick all the time when I was working before because I wasn't working on the right things. I think so. It wasn't, and I thought it was stress, whatever that means. But then you realize when you are being pulled, when you're doing this stuff and you're putting those hours in that context, it's a little bit different.
Your essential wellness.
Yes.
Like when you wake up today and you have to go to work, is there a sense of dread? That can't be healthy.
No, it can't be healthy.
Or when you wake up that day and you have to go to work, it's like, I can't wait to get to work. That's obviously healthy. That's something that's nourishing on a fundamentally spiritual level.
Yes.
That's something that we all need.
And it takes away some of those doubting questions that we talked about too, right? Because that's also part of what chips away at that well-being is when you are thinking like that you're a fraud, or when you are having to worry about how to connect with people that you don't naturally connect with, or some of those kinds of things. I think that also takes away from that because it increases all those questions, divert energy into things that probably could be used better elsewhere.
I think when you find your life's work, it's no longer that self-doubt. It's no longer that, am I good enough or am I going to be discovered as a fraud? I can confidently say in what I do, like I can confidently, and this is no amounts of ego or arrogance or anything. I can say for what I do, I'm the best on the planet at what I do. I can say that.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah. I mean, I agree. You're the one we invited.
Yeah. And that's such a great feeling.
it is.
It's not a matter, it's not coming from a place of like scarcity, I want to be the best so you're not. It's not coming from a place of competitiveness. It's just like this, it's not easy, but it's effortless.
That's interesting, yeah. So once you made that decision to leave,
Yeah.
what did you do next? What was the first thing you did after that?
You know, it's cliche, but when you close one door, another opens. So as I was, you know, firing at clients and taking things off my wall, I got a call. That December, I got a call from a law school friend of mine who had encountered a small book publisher. And around that time, like 2003, the big thing was like rapper memoirs. Like people wanted to know the tell-all. They were signing these artists to do tell-all. So this publisher called me. I was introduced via my friend, and they were like, do you have any clients we want to do a tell-all book? And I was like, no, I just fired all of my clients, but I have some ideas.
Yeah.
So we started talking about ideas, and I know nothing about publishing, and you know, I've always been very insecure about my writing. But over the years as an attorney, I realized I learned how to write. You know, part of the journey also is trusting the journey, trusting where you are, even though you might be miles away from where you need to be. So I just got really bold and passionate again about these ideas and having someone actually listening to my creative ideas. So over a couple of weeks, over the course of a couple of weeks, I had a kick-ass proposal. The proposal was too big for the publisher to handle, but it landed me a book deal. So 3 months after burning everything that I had worked so hard to create over, you know, a good portion of my life, I had a book deal. I actually had a check in my hand for a creative idea, and it was very validating. It was just like, it's not going to pay all my bills, but I just got paid for my ideas.
For expression.
For expression, for some, I just jumped out the window and there was a safety net.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I did. And I wrote a book, at the time bling was big, so I kind of did like this serious look at the phenomena of bling, the history of bling and hip hop. But we really took a serious but tongue-in-cheek approach with myself and my co-author, Gabe Tolliver. And it was just validating.
So tell us how Combat Jack came about.
Combat Jack came about during this transition. And, you know, doing research for my book, I totally ignored the internet up until 2003, 2004. Totally ignored the internet. Thought it was a waste of time. You know, I would have, you know, younger rappers coming to me and saying, you got to listen to my MP3, and I'd be like, dude, I just listen to CDs. So I was like, I was really geared to be brick and mortar.
Yeah.
But now that I had burned everything down, it's like I'm discovering a new world. Particularly with the I want to say 2004, 2005 was this renaissance of like hip hop related blogs, so like urban writing. Like you just had some amazing, amazing blogs that were giving perspectives that had never been heard before. And coming from the industry, I was reading these readings, particularly this one blogger, Byron Crawford, who was just attacking the industry, but in such a smart way, style-wise. And I was like, I don't want to attack the industry. I want to write about the industry, but I'm too close to the industry. So the book Generation Kill had just come out about the first tour of duty in Afghanistan. And there was a chapter on Combat Jack. I was like, I like that name. I'm going to become Combat Jack, and that became mine. So that's the story.
Well, and you've used that metaphor in a lot of different ways too. That is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Like the combat metaphor.
Yeah.
Even today.
Well, it's you know, if you grow up in hip hop and if you grow up in business, it is a sense of competition. It is combative, and my mindset at the time is if I'm going to write as if I'm an MC. You know, each writing that I do is going to be, you know, some type of flair. It might not always be the greatest piece that I write, but it's going to be my song. You know, and it just felt, it woke up in me a sense of being like a child again. You know, instinct and just doing what comes naturally to you. So that, you know, yeah, combat.
Yeah, but then you have the peace sign on your on the logo, right?
Yeah. Well, what what do they say? We fight for peace,
Yeah.
and we prepare for war by being peaceful, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of hokey, I guess.
We dig that.
Yeah.
So what about podcasting? Because you were in that pretty early, I think, right?
3-4 years ago.
I don't know. That's
3 or 4 years ago. I mean, early for urban podcasting, but not the whole podcast business. I think early enough before podcast became, a big thing, and it was totally by accident. We were doing an online radio show, and I owe so much to our listeners. We had this one listener that was like, "Dude, you got to record your shows and upload them to Apple. I mean, to iTunes. We got to convert each episode into podcasts." And I didn't know anything about it. I was just like, sure, run with it. And so we fell into the whole podcast business.
And then last week, you're Ad Age Media Maven of 2015.
Yes.
So, which as a podcaster, right?
As a podcaster, thank you. But it's opening doors without the intention of opening doors. It's doing what you're committed to do, and then things fall in place. And I'm not saying ignore the realities of business and monetizing and everything like that, but do what you're good at. And hopefully do what you're good at with a sense of creating good, with a sense of inspiring, with a sense of leaving a good mark, like a legacy to your name. There's so much going on in our society, and I don't ever want to be the guy on the soapbox. But being able to have fun and go from lowbrow to highbrow, but still inspire, naturally is such an amazing gift. And I can't sit and wish that everyone that had a platform would do the same. But I do wish that most of us would use our platform to really inspire.
We happen to have a talk about that today.
Yeah.
About using your platform. But it is, that's something that I think we've learned and that we've seen in other folks too, is that you can make a choice, right? About one, acknowledging that you have a platform, and then two, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, and fighting for good can still be sexy.
Right.
I think there's this misconception.
That's going to be like the most tweeted thing that we just had.
I was
today.
speaking to a young blogger who's very popular a couple of weeks ago, and they said to me, "You'll never see me tweeting anything about Black Lives Matter, because you know that what the perception is of that." And I didn't know the perception of that, and I was just like, "What are you talking about? Like, this is like the discussion of race in America right now is sexier than sex." You know what I mean?
And with all the layers,
it's such a hot topic, and I think this is the first time in our history where, regardless if people want to see it or not, it's an engaging dialogue that's not going to go away. We're having the dialogue,
right?
And you can't stop the diverse voices that are just being pushed to the forefront. It's an amazing time. So why not capitalize on this opportunity to at least have the talk?
We have to have the talk.
Just to talk.
Yeah, and keep opening those conversations all over. Wow, there's so much there.
It's a lot, right?
It's a lot. It's good though. So it's I'm trying to figure out. So what do you? I know you talk a little bit about how you're using your platform. Like you have a couple kind of key things or themes. Do you want to tell us what they are?
I think the most important theme is honesty. Even if you're still trying to figure out what that sense of honesty is, even if you're trying to work through it, I find that, in this age of transparency, honesty is a premium. Getting people to support your brand. I mean, we live in an information age, so we know what the bullshit is right now. Like, we all know what the bullshit is. Regardless if we decide to subscribe to it or not, we know what the bullshit is. And it's kind of like what's going on with health right now, with eating. Like, healthy eating is the big thing because it's the most natural thing, and that it's healthy for you. And it's the same thing with your brand. Whatever business you're in, if you can be as transparent as possible, you're gonna gain an allegiance with your supporters. The medium of podcasting also provides a two-way intimate relationship with your audience. I have listeners that are very, very honest about how they feel, and it's a symbiotic relationship. that continues to feed and grow the process. So honesty is definitely important. It's funny that because now in the space of hip-hop podcasts, it seems like it's getting a lot more competitive, and certain names are coming in and claiming that they're going to dominate, this field. And as it starts getting kind of crowded, I continue to look in the next direction. Like I continue to look for conversations, not with necessarily the biggest names, but those who have the best stories, those who can provide the best dialogue. So I'm constantly going against the grain, like, yeah, I want this performer on my show, but this person has a better story for this week that's gonna be as engaging, and it's gonna nourish myself and my audience and continue to really help us to grow, once again, the brand.
And that's really why you're here, because that's the connection, the honesty piece. I mean, I think that's something we've really tried to do from the very beginning too, is that we've always wanted these to be honest conversations. And I think if you've been around, hopefully you've seen some of that too. And that's what was clear to me right away when I first started listening a few years ago, was how honest those conversations are. And like deep honesty from people you wouldn't necessarily think are gonna open up like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important, like sitting down with Scarface, the rapper Scarface, and talking about what inspired Mind Playing Tricks on Me. And he starts talking about his grandmother, and then he breaks down and he starts crying. And this is Scarface, like the toughest motherfucking gangster rapper around, but he's got this sincerity and this connection to his grandmother that you don't hear about when someone's talking about making a gangster rap record.
Right.
And it's that texture. It's like, okay, so I understand the perception of black men in hip hop, but who really are these black men in hip hop, and what are they going through, and how do they create this art, and how nonviolent is the theme of their work, regardless of how it's being delivered. Right. So it's just the textures and the complexities and just the humanizing of a segment of people that really have been dehumanized for centuries.
For a long, yeah. Yeah, that's okay. You can do that.
And then I think the third aspect is, so I'm engaged in social media like 24/7. I'm addicted.
That's how we connected.
It's ruined my sense of focus. Just because I like to meditate in the morning, and now I'm, but because I'm so addicted to social media, when there's something that starts pulling my attention away from what my work needs to be, I just mute. I just mute everything, and I go back into my silo, because I find going into my silo has afforded me this sense of success. And every time I go back to the silo, I'm doing the work that I need to do. So not being distracted, not saying, oh, I need to get this artist because, it's like, let me continue to stay in my silo, focus.
So that's one of the things that we're interested in too, is like, what do you do to preserve, fortify, sustain yourself as you do all different kinds of work, where the satisfaction has to come from you internally, I think, and there's no structure telling you what to do next, that kind of thing. So how do you take care of yourself?
I think it's that commitment to happiness versus commitment to success. We were, it's funny because the monetizing of podcasting is still relatively new, and it's based on advertising dollars. So as advertisers are realizing the power of podcasting, of urban podcasting, we're starting to get thrown opportunities. So a couple of months ago, I was approached by a tobacco company, and it was a good check. It was a really good check. It was like, I can't do that. And even before I think about how much I need this check, I'm going to say no, just so that I can feel good.
Yeah.
That I said no.
Yeah.
And I never felt bad. I could have used it, but I never felt bad about turning that. Because I'm like, it's not going to feel natural to me. And my audience already knows me. So if I'm pushing nicotine and tobacco, they're going to be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
So it's commitment to my happiness, commitment to my craft. That comes first.
And it helps keep.
And it's a selfish sense of being committed to my own personal happiness. That has to come first.
But that comes through that in being able to do what you do. That's part of the pulling piece that you talked about. But I think that's also part of the conversations. I mean, how could you have those honest conversations if you weren't being honest with yourself, right?
Right.
They have to go together.
You know, I don't want to sound condescending, but I'm amazed at how so many people in media are afraid to be honest. Like, I'm like, why can't you be honest? Like, and maybe you know, I'm like naive, but I just can't understand how people don't understand the premium of honesty.
So let's talk about that a little bit
Yeah.
more and moving, like pushing through that. So I had a conversation with somebody, I think it was Art, who's in here today, about like, especially coming from the business side, about feeling some pressure to sort of sanitize your messages, and like it wasn't okay to be honest, especially about certain things related to social justice and other parts of that as a business person. And we talked a little bit about this, but you know, I decided a few years ago that I wasn't going to do that anymore. But how do you deal with that, like the honesty in terms of what you talk about, who you're talking to? How does that play into those things? How do you use your platform? Can you talk more about that?
You know, I try not to sanitize my work, but at the same time, you have to be smart. So if I want to have the dialogue about social justice, particularly with regard to race, I've had some friends that have pulled me to the side, and I trust where they're coming from. They're like, you're speaking the truth, but white people don't always want to hear about white people. Right? So I try to find an artful way to talk about white people without saying white people. You know, I try not to be as in your face. It's you know, or if I'm talking about Palestine and Israel, it's like, how do I artfully get my message across? Not cowering away from the realities or the difficulties of the conversation, but how do I not push away? How do I bring people into this conversation? So it's subtlety.
Yeah.
But still getting the same point across. So I think that's the only editing I do. It's just like, instead of the terms, I'll get the message across without saying you people. It's like we, or we have to figure out, and then we will figure out who they are that I'm addressing. You know?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully we
Hopefully.
will. Hopefully we will.
Yeah.
That's
but still, you can't offend. You know, if
No.
you can't offend all the time, and there are enough people
Yeah.
in social media that are doing the offending.
Yeah.
So I don't need to be one of those.
No, I mean, I think that comes across over and over again as it's a positive, constructive approach to a lot of the issues that come up and that you address.
Right.
And also, I think in a lot of different dimensions too, because I think some of the young artists that you've talked to, maybe this might be a biased question, but people might think of them in a certain way, and then as you get to talking to them, you find other things. Like I think the Yogati episode that you just did a few weeks ago, right?
You know, my goal is it's not an interview as much as it's a dialogue. And you know, I don't know anything about interviewing. I never trained to be a professional interviewer.
Me either.
But I can talk my ass off. And I'm really curious about whoever's sitting in front of me. And I don't care if you're a trap rapper. I don't care if you're labeled this male chauvinist pig or whatever it is. I want to have the conversation with you, at least give you an opportunity to give your side of the story. That's really all I do. This is a platform for you to give your side of the story. There's another, I guess, with regard to policing what I say. The only open dialogue that I'm having with myself currently is with the use of the word nigger. You know, I've gone public, I'm not gonna use the word, I'm gonna use the word. And it's just ongoing, like, should I put it in my tweets? Should I not put it in my tweets? And, you know, is this edifying at some points, and is it taking away from my message? And this is the only, but there's something validating to me about this
Validating and
love-hate relationship with this word.
right. Oh, I see.
So I use it as I'm battling with it as well.
But that's also kind of vulnerability too, right? Because
Yeah.
we were talking about that. Because you open yourself up to either side, right?
And if you're going to judge me, then I'm fine with that as well.
Well, also because you're working through it, like you
I'm
said.
working through it, yeah.
So all that's input into that,
Exactly.
figuring that out. So we were also talking about who you've had on the show and a few other things. I promised I was going to ask you about this, so I'm going to ask. This is me maybe abusing my platform,
Okay.
but for me, I love the fact that you have women on your show. You seem committed to having more women on your show. that you're talking about women in hip hop, so getting maybe erasing, if that's a word, it's not a word, but some of the women that maybe have been sort of erased from the history, but also other women, like we've talked about the Feminista Jones episode and things like that. So tell me more, because you shared a little bit about this before, but tell me more about how that came about and how you see that going forward.
You know, I'm a product of the society, and, you know, so I am very uneducated about issues with women, dealing with women. You know, I follow the narrative. And I had a good friend of mine recently say, Reggie, you need to have more women on the show. And I was like, oh my God, I haven't had women on the show. But it's just telling of my limited view. You know, in my dedication to evolve, that showed me like, okay, I'm lacking in this area. And so I just started like not going out of my way, but just really paying attention. And also this past year, one of the most amazing dialogues that I've been keyed into is the dialogue about black feminism. You know, and it's just an amazing dialogue. And so I feel like a white man that sympathizes with black feminism, and that I want to support it as much as possible, but I don't want to say too much. You know, because I don't want to say the wrong thing. So let's have people on the show talk about this.
That's another place where there's a lot of room for that you people conversation too.
And I found that, you know, particularly this past year, the more that I've had women on the show, the more it's enhanced the conversation. And, you know, it went from being a predominantly like a male listenership to like, I love the women that listen to my show. It's just a whole, it's eye-opening, and it feels evolutionary in terms of the conversations that they're having. And, you know, I've been fascinated by the whole schism with black men and black feminists. And like, where's that coming from? And then, you know, the more I feature women on my show, certain black men are like throwing shots my way. And I'm like, well, I understand that our ego is fragile, but like, where's this coming from? And if this elicits this type of response, I want more.
Yeah.
I want so much more of this, because I want to evolve. I want to understand the dialogue. Like shutting down women's voices is the same thing as shutting down black people's voices. And I don't want to be complicit in that. And I don't have all the answers, and I'll say the wrong thing, and I'll come off sounding like a chauvinist, but I want to have those conversations.
So we can be buddies on that, on the opposite side, on different sides of those different questions.
Yeah, but it enhanced my show completely.
Well, and so there's two things. I mean, like, I didn't realize, and I'm not in the middle, like, don't base any of your decisions based on my reaction to your show, but it, like, I didn't realize how validating it would be to hear conversations about hip hop and have more conversations about women in just sort of a generic hip hop, not generic, but, you know, in a general sense, not just a women in hip hop sort of conversation. So that was something that it stood out for me when I first started hearing that.
We ignore women. Like in hip hop, we ignore women. I mean, that's a fact. And we have this platform. I have this platform where I espouse that I want conversations with people that are not the natural, like, next go-to. I want those conversations.
We're kind of partial to those conversations here too.
I love those conversations.
Yeah. But I think there's also a good, like, business, because, you know, I have to put my business hat on every once in a while. Like, that's an interesting business question too, of like, who are you not including, or who are you not talking to? And how might it change, shift, improve what you're doing if you actually went out of your way to talk to them or include those things? Yeah,
I mean, I had DeRay and Netta on my show last week. And DeRay has been on my show twice. I hadn't had Netta on the show before. But, I mean, how can you be in hip-hop? How can you be at the forefront of hip-hop and not have a dialogue with DeRay and Netta? Because they're at the forefront of this movement. And this, you know, I'm a generation removed from this movement. How are the youth not galvanizing and excited and passionate about this time? How are they not having these conversations with these people?
How are we not having those conversations everywhere?
Yeah, everywhere.
It should be everywhere. It feels like it should be everywhere. So you are also married to a pretty amazing woman, it sounds like?
Yeah, she's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
She's very amazing. I am.
She didn't text me to talk about that either.
She's very amazing.
It's just part of the, like, sister solidarity that we have. But she's also amazing because she works with math for girls, which makes her.
Yes, she's a mathematician.
That's close to my heart.
So my wife is, we have 4 kids, and we've had all of our kids natural, like no intervention of drugs or anything. As a matter of fact, my last daughter was born in our bedroom, and it was we set that up, and it was just amazing. So she's kick-ass with regard to that. As a matter of fact, during her labor, the midwife, because she was having some, she got exhausted, so she got tired of pushing. So the midwife suggested that she sit on my lap, and we both push. So we're on my bed, and we're pushing, and we're pushing, and we're pushing, and then I get these cramps in my stomach, right? And I'm like, oh, and I see all the work that's going on, and I'm like, motherfucker, don't say anything. Just push. So, but it was just so beautiful and so amazing.
That's a pretty good metaphor, too.
Yeah, just don't say anything, just push, because I'm not doing the work, you know? And just the whole dynamic of like, you know, there's no painkillers, but the midwife was like, if you really need something to, like, Reggie, go get her a shot of vodka. And just so organic and how natural. So yeah, my wife is amazing on so many different levels, but that's one of the things that you know, that she's so pure with regard to her body and her health and the health of our kids.
So, and that's a topic there are two topics that we touch on every year here, and one is around resilience, like you heard this morning, which is a lot of great insights there today. And then another one is the one that's coming up after this one, which is how do you have a life and do this kind of work at the same time? Because really, like, for me, it seems like when you're doing this kind of work, it's a lifestyle in a way too, or it takes over a huge portion of your life. And it's one thing to make a decision for yourself to go with this, you know, uncertain income situation and hours at all different times. But when you have a whole family that is connected to that, how does that work for you?
You know, I would say I disagree in that when I was younger and when I had more disposable income and when I was single and had less kids, then my career was a lifestyle.
Oh, interesting.
You know, but now it's like my work is my work, but I work at home. So if I'm preparing for an interview and my daughter has a tantrum, I had got to deal with my daughter and her tantrum. Like, I'm constantly engaged at home. So my family, my personal life is my lifestyle.
Okay.
And Combat Jack is my release. So there's a difference.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget my father-in-law, who was very successful in the music industry, Teddy Van. He won a Grammy working with Luther Vandross. But, you know, he was never consumed by the industry. You know, he was always home. He was always available and accessible to his family. And he used to tell me all the time, particularly in the entertainment business where you can lose yourself, he says it takes 100% for you to really create the hype. But then you have to do the work. You have to do 200% of the work for you not to believe your own hype. And so there's something very validating about having an awesome interview with Rick Ross, and I'm getting all of these accolades on social media, and I'm feeling like a superhero. And I come home and my wife is like, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, and I need you to take out the trash. And I appreciate that because it keeps me grounded.
Yes,
you know?
yes. I think that's super important. And I also think, even though there are challenges that come with this, doing this kind of work, and you know, different situations have different alignment maybe around that, but I also think there probably have been a lot of families and relationships that have also been destroyed by people staying in jobs they shouldn't have stayed in, probably.
Well, you know, that was one of the reasons why I left, because I felt the music industry, because I had just had my third child, and I was like, you know what, I'm neglecting my family. I'm away all the time. I'm hustling. I'm at these parties. I'm, you know, cross country. I'm trying to close these deals, and I'm neglecting my family, and it doesn't feel good because my family is so important to me. So I don't want to say that was part of a major determinative factor in terms of me walking away from the industry, but it was a factor. I want to be closer to home and do dope work.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
So one more family question.
Yes.
I know your eldest son just started university this fall.
Yes, he did.
So did you feel like you had to send him off with some like wisdom, and if so, will you share it with us?
I guess the wisdom was trust us, trust me. You know, I think one of the main reasons why my show has been really successful and relevant is because I have kids that are in that age right now where they're the tastemakers.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas I always led him in terms of what was quality and what was good and, you know, just my taste, he's now sharing his taste with me, and then I'm like, yo, this is hot to the world, you know. But it's like trust.
Mm-hmm.
Like trust is really important. Like he, you know, he's across the river, so he's at NYU, we're in Brooklyn, and it's like trust us. Like if there's any issues, like that's really what I'm trying to nail. Like whatever happens in your life, don't let us get the news from some other source. Trust us, you know. So that's really what I try to hammer down.
That's probably, I don't remember, well, I was never an 18-year-old boy, so I don't remember that. But at 18, like just the idea of trusting people.
Well, trusting your parents
is hard, yeah.
Is very hard, especially since, you know, we tend to think that our parents don't know what we're up to.
Or don't know anything.
Or don't know
in some
anything
cases.
about us.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't necessarily know everything that my kids are up to, but one thing I do know is I do know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't know who we are. That's the issue. They don't know who I am.
Right.
And it's like, no, just trust me. Like, we can have these conversations. So that's been the thing.
So from the couple of business things here, so we have this like expanding who you're talking to and with.
Yes. I'm speaking to...
intergenerationally as well as gender and as well as other
next Wednesday,
communities.
I will be interviewing Norman Lear.
Oh,
And
that's fantastic.
I don't even know where to start. You know, but I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. Probably those of us who are old enough, our childhood in the 70s watching Norman Lear.
Well, the challenge with Norman is, you know, he made all of this great programming, revolutionary programming in the 70s and in the 80s, and you know, I'm a child of that. But I'm interviewing him at NYU. So how do I make this conversation engaging for the next generation?
Right.
You know, but fortunately, a lot of the music, Norman had amazing music in his sitcoms. And a lot of those songs inspired hip hop records. You know, they've been sampled, you know, countless many songs. So just trying to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
That's the goal, bridging the gap between his legacy and how it's relevant.
Connecting dots.
Connecting the dot, yeah.
That's,
The dots.
I like to see that. Can you tell us about Raise the Bar, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Raise the bar. So I'm an attorney, so raise the bar, you know. I like to drink, raise the bar. You know, but I also think it's incumbent on each and every one of us to not just get the job done. You know, I think once again that it's a very special, magical time, and whatever you do, regardless where you're at, if you feel uncertain or unsure, but if you're going to do the work, do your absolute best. And do it so that if you scored a touchdown today, tomorrow score a touchdown and a half. So the challenge is for yourself personally, but also to challenge your peers. You know, because a lot of our peers are and colleagues that actually control the industry, but they're just putting out substandard, marginal work. Challenge them to raise the bar. So it's a call for myself to raise the bar and for the industry. Raise the bar. Like, this is the time to do it. Each and every one of us has to raise the bar.
We'll
Hashtag raise the bar.
hashtag Raise the Bar.
Hashtag raise the bar.
We will co-sign that.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what we're trying to promote in
Right.
different ways here too. I'll ask one more question, then I'll open it up. What do you love about the work you're doing right now?
It's empowering. And it feels good. And so from a hip-hop competitive stance, it's like, that shit was hot, right? But more importantly, so I talk about these concepts that we don't talk about usually in our culture. Like, one of the things that I've been really talking about a lot has been mental health, and mental health in the black community, and mental health with regard to black men. So I got an email last week from a longtime listener from out of nowhere, and he said, listen, I listened to your show, and I noticed you talk about mental health a lot, and I think I need therapy. So I responded, I was like, listen, I'm not a professional, but I know, I'm going to assume that you're a person of color, and I know that my white colleagues, you know, it's very normal to have a therapist or to have mental assistance. It's almost like another aspect of white privilege. But in our community, where there's so much trauma, you know, especially for young men, the encouragement they get is, well, man up, little nigga, like man up, you know? So his subsequent response was, well, you know, I'm in my mid-20s, but at 16, I was shot. And for a couple of seconds, I flatlined. And then I healed. And I just had this trauma. And when I was home, as a teenager, like, I didn't go out. And then the neighborhood started taunting me. Like, well, you scared? Like, kind of man, you scared? And so, how do you go through that at such a young, vulnerable age and not have, how do you not heal on so many different levels? So doing that, so when I get a response like that I'm having such a good time, like it feels like I'm back in college again. It feels like what I'm doing is so fun and I'm so energized. But then seeing responses like that, it's like, okay, it's so validating. Like, I wouldn't replace, you can't pay me enough to not get responses like that.
Well, and that's the part of the pull, right?
Yeah.
It's like that there's so much to do. There's so much work to do. There's so many of those conversations to generate, to create, to connect, that it keeps you motivated, I think, to do that.
And I think the most important thing is, like, to take away the sense that the work is dreadful. That's like I said, I'm having the best time of my life, but I'm doing the work, and we can all do that. We can all find a way. We don't have to give something up to give something. You know?
Right. In fact, it's almost the opposite.
It's the opposite.
The more you focus on giving,
the more you get.
the more that comes back.
But it's a process.
Yep.
It's a process, and it's a continuous process. It's been a process for me. It's a continuous process for me, and I'm going to continue to work that out. But I found that to be very validating. The more you give, the more you get back.
That's excellent. I bet there are some questions for you here in the audience. So I think we...
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, thank you.
Raise your hand if you have a question. I will come to you with a microphone. Questions?
Back there.
Oh, back there, yeah.
Just. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you coming out. I'm a new age artist. I like to say new age because it was different back in your days. It was more, like you said, the EPMD album. I know that was powerful. I was just listening to that record the other day. But what is your view on today's hip hop? And like you did discuss about artists using their platform more to educate. What is your views on today's hip hop artists?
Pardon me. I'm still in love with the art form, and particularly now, I'm so amazed at how quickly the genre is changing, how quickly and how rapidly the genre is evolving, and I think I credit that to technology, the advent of technology, and the ease of access, so that you can hear musically like where people are going. I think it's amazing. My only I guess the only thing that I'm not too happy about is I think there are so many more powerful voices that could be so much more powerful if they address some of the issues. Like if we want to exhibit how powerful the black community is and the spending power, like having some of our biggest MCs say, well, not necessarily boycott Nike, but for 2016, only buy 4 pairs of sneakers and just let them feel that bite and let's see what they come to the table. Just using their voice and their platform, not to live an austere life or to determine that, or to put out an austere demand to their listeners, but let's empower ourselves and still be fly. You know what I mean?
Thoughtful.
Other questions? Show of hands. Hands anywhere?
I'm really loud, so.
I can hear you.
Yeah, you mentioned that writing was something that you brought from law and your legal training into your new work. Is there anything else that you kind of salvaged from that that's been really important?
From my legal world, or?
From your previous career.
The preparation. so once again, like I'm interviewing Norman Lear this Wednesday, and I'm reading his autobiography, which is like 700 pages. But Norman is 93 years old, so he writes about every aspect of his life. Mm-hmm. So some of it is not necessarily fun reading, but the no shots to Norman, but the discipline of being an attorney and reading through pages of documents that don't resonate with you, but you still have to read them to be prepared. So I would say the preparation process, the listening process, the pulling out facts, and some of my listeners, a lot of my listeners complain that I interrupt my guests during the dialogue, but I'll hear something that might have gotten glossed over, and I want to go back to that point. So I think it's the preparation and just the dialogue and the fact finding and the fact pulling out that I gained that from my it's I say trust the journey because the journey is never wherever you end up, wherever you are, it's not a waste of time. I talk about a friend of mine, Caesar, who trained to be a classical conductor, and during the lowest part of his career, he ended up having to paint houses. And this was the most depressing part of his life, and he thought that he was wasting his life. And when things opened up for him again, and when he started traveling the world as a world-class conductor, the first thing he noticed was that his stroke was more magnificent, and it added more character to his craft. So there's no wasted moments along the journey.
No wasted motions either.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, another question here.
Brother Reggie, how you doing?
What's happening, man?
I have 2 questions for you.
Okay.
One question is, what are you listening to when you're driving? The second question is, if you have a chance to change anything, what would it be?
I listen to a lot of Howard Stern, only because indirectly Howard has been my most direct mentor with regard to how I conduct my interviews. I want my interviews to be as engaging as Howard's interviews. Not the old Howard of the 80s and the 90s and the antics, but I can be in the car listening to his interviews with people that I have no interest in. And he makes it so interesting. And I kind of want to maintain that same spirit. So Howard's done a lot of talk radio. I'm really boring in the car. I like Drake. Drake is great. When my 13-year-old is in the car, we have an amazing time with Migos and Young Thug and all the stuff that I'm not supposed to be listening to. But it's so pure, and it's such a moment with my kid, and we're just in there acting stupid and Gucci flip-flops in the future. So all of that stuff, And if I could change anything, when I was representing an early Rockefeller Def Jam Jay-Z, I would have walked away from my legal fees and negotiated a percentage of Rockefeller Records. That's the only thing I think I would have changed.
That makes sense. Any other
questions?
Is there one? Which one?
I want more questions, please.
Yeah. I have lots.
I'm interested in hearing more about that in-between time after you shut down your legal office. You had the check for the book in hand, but what you're doing now hadn't taken shape yet. So what was hard about that time, lessons learned during that time, things you may have tried that didn't quite work out, but maybe like your painter friend carried forward into the next thing, sort of that in-between murky time?
I thought that walking away from my legal practice gave me room to find a job. And so I fought for a year, I toiled for a year to become an executive at MTV. Because I thought the most natural progression was going from music to music television. And so here I am now, a high-ranking executive at MTV, and I'm like, what the fuck am I in? This is not natural to me. Doesn't feel good, and it was actually a very miserable period of my life. No shots to MTV, it just wasn't for me. So I realized at that point, like, the traditional job might not be there for me. So I had to make those choices. I had to experience that to say I'm not going to subject myself to that anymore. You know, I've had some job. I worked corporate at Citigroup in their legal department, where I was sitting in a cubby. I had never sat in a cubby before, and it was just, I mean, the pay was great, but it was just like, rip my eyes out, please. I can't do this. So it was validation that I wasn't for that. And I'm really fortunate because my wife was raised, her family's always been entrepreneurs. And her whole thing is like, you don't need a job. So going through the process of thinking that I needed a job and failing miserably and then having this encouragement at home was just very fulfilling. But I had to go through that to grow into that, to feel confident. And then, you know, there were periods where I needed to make money, so I thought I'd go back into practicing law and I'd get a handful of clients and I'd be doing the work, and then I'm like, this feels like I just moved back into my mom's basement. Mm-hmm. Like I did this before and I'm dealing with this, I'm going backwards. But it's kind of like, it's like feeling the journey, you know, and feeling what fits, what no longer fits, what fits perfectly. It's constantly moving, you know, constantly moving. There was a period of time where nothing was happening. And just, that's when that depression, you know, that laying in bed and eating and just wanting to disappear, but then something driving you to move forward again. It's all of that. It's a painful process. But to detach and find what your life's work is, it has to be pain. It's like birth. It's a painful process, but it's birth. It's rebirth, finding yourself.
When you don't really know when it's going to happen, like birth also, right?
No, you
like
don't know.
You might think you know, but
Right.
you kind of
Although
find out.
you know, if you're moving in the right direction, so I'm,
And
you know,
forward motion.
I tend to talk like, you know, new age, like spirituality, but I really do believe that the universe gives you signs. Mm-hmm. The universe gives you signs, and it all comes down to whether you're paying attention and acknowledging those signs or not. We're a very, like, I think one of the things that we downplay as human beings is that we're a very intuitive creature. Mm-hmm. We're very intuitive, but at what point did technology and salary, you know, overcome the importance of, you know, intuition,
Right.
and gut, and knowing that something is right, even though everything else is telling you to move left. Mm-hmm. You know, so I think it's very important that we listen to. I mean, it's, you know, if you're a Christian, it's God talking to you. You know, it's Buddha talking to you. It's Allah talking to you. It's the universe. You're part of the universe, and the universe, if you're moving in the right direction, will continue to give you the right pointers. I wholly believe that.
And I think, I don't know if this is the same thing, but for me too, it's also about learning to let go. And I think for me, this has come from moving around different countries, but like we're so deterministic here. Mm-hmm. And so we think like we have to have a plan, we have to follow the plan. The plan is the only way things are going to work. And then there's all this agony that happens when the plan doesn't work or things don't go according to plan, or my plan was the wrong plan. And I think part of that, going back to the intuition piece and being open and receptive to the signs, like things change a whole lot when you can move in that direction.
I mean, let's go back to our childhood. Like one of the toys that I loved playing with was that toy, the red and yellow toy where you had these shapes, and you would try to fit the star shape into the circle slot, and you kept trying until you realized it wasn't meant for that slot.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with our journey. At certain points, you'll feel this doesn't fit, but we continue to be locked into making it fit.
Yes.
Let go and find out where that star shape fits.
It only took me 10 years to figure that out. But I think, you know, when Manifest and I started this too, and one of the things we've said, no disrespect to your former client, but one of the things that we've said from the beginning is there's no blueprint.
Right.
Like this is why
There's no blueprint.
That's right. So our whole idea was like, let's get a bunch of smart people together and talk about what they've learned instead of having people tell you the top 5 things you need to do to be successful as X, Y, Z. And so that's, I mean, and it's like there's a lot of deprogramming, at least for me, that has to happen in order to be able to do that, to let go of the idea of like I need to know what the plan is, or I need to concoct the perfect plan.
There's no perfect plan. I mean, you have to plan. I mean, you have
And be
to
prepared. I think that's.
you have to be prepared. But even as a young attorney, so being first generation hip hop, and growing up in hip hop, and some people credited me as being like the first hip hop attorney. But being the hip hop attorney who would wear his suits, but at the same time come to the office in Timberlands and a hoodie, that just mystified the rest of the legal community. They're like, how are you guys dressing like thugs and ending up with clients like Jay-Z and DMX and just throwing the whole blueprint out the water? We didn't know what we were doing, but we were driven to do what we were doing at the time. And so there is no blueprint,
Yeah.
I like to believe.
Me too.
I still don't understand what that ad agency nod is, because there's no blueprint.
Right. Right.
I got a question back here.
Okay.
Whoa.
Hi.
Over there.
Hey, what's your name?
Nemo. Hey. Couple of related questions. Do you feel like you've arrived, and are you comfortable with where you're at right now? And given where you're at right now, do you still experience the imposter syndrome that you talked about earlier? And also, how do you deal with uncertainty?
So I haven't felt the imposter feeling in a long time. I just feel very genuine, and that feels so good, Am I happy with where I am? I could make a lot more money. Like, I need to make a lot. I have expenses, but and it's starting to level out. But it's just like, making a certain amount of money for so many years and then making a certain amount of money afterwards is an adjustment. So it's, I could definitely make more money, but I'm happy where I am, enjoying the journey. I'm very happy where I am. And then, am I happy with uncertainty? So I have a good friend of mine who is a very successful day trader. And his approach to trading is he gets rid of all of the indicators and the predictors and whatever, and he says he gets on the market and it's like surfing. Now, I've never surfed before, but I do know that in the work that I do, in the competitive work that I do, in the mosaic puzzle that I'm putting together with each subsequent guest, it feels like I'm surfing. It feels like I'm on the wave and I'm just trusting my feeling with where that next wave is going to take me, and do I ride it, do I crash through it? So it's actually very fulfilling, uncertainty, because isn't life uncertain? I'm so glad that our society is showing us that there's no certainty. Like, we're coming from a generation where, job was secure, and there's no job security. And so I think, most of us that are in this room come from that period where the curtain's been raised and there's no certainty. So where do we take our lives in a fulfilling way that we're the most comfortable with uncertainty? So yeah, I love the uncertainty of what tomorrow brings, because all we have is this moment. And if we stop focusing on what's in the past and what's coming forward, each moment that we're in right now, it has endless possibilities. So it's just being in the moment.
I think that's a pretty good place to end this.
Yeah.
Do you want it? Go ahead.
I
Sure.
Pardon me.
I was wondering if you would speak to your evolution as a leader and a voice, and your feeling of how you negotiate the responsibility that you have to your audience, because you mentioned this young man who reached out to you for help. And I wonder, as you're building this platform, how do you negotiate that sense of responsibility to the people that are listening to you when they ask for help?
I think where we are right now is, I think we've become too comfortable waiting for leaders, waiting for the next leader. And I don't care what changes we go through in America with regard to, like, say, gun control or whatever, unless there's initiative for each of us to individually do the work, we won't see change. Like it's incumbent on all of us to do the work. So what I do is what I do. My work is what I do. And I in no way want to be a leader as much as someone that encourages everyone to find their magic. You know, so I'm sharing what I've learned to share so that it encourages everyone else to find wherever their journey takes them. So I'm uncomfortable with that term leader as much as I love to inspire. And where I draw the line, even with that specific situation that I spoke about, I was very clear to this young man. I am no way an expert in mental health, but in that situation, I spoke to some friends of mine that were experts, and they located someone in his area that he could speak to, and I sent him that referral, and I was like, I hope this takes you where you want. So it's the work. I negotiate not being the leader, but just still doing the work and encouraging people to do the work. Each of us can't do it alone. We all have to do it.
Excellent. So now you're officially part of the Giant Sips family. Also part of our...
Is there like a ceremony?
Maybe, I don't know. We're working on it. And part of our emerging Brooklyn satellite.
Brooklyn. Anybody in here from
folks.
Brooklyn?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Brooklyn Park, it's a suburb.
Okay. There's a Brooklyn Park?
There's a Brooklyn Park and a Brooklyn Center.
Really, Brooklyn
Yeah.
Center, all right.
So, yeah.
You guys having a good time?
So thank you for this moment.
Thank you so much.
This is really great. We got you to the middle of the country briefly. We'll try
We
to
are in
bring
the
you
middle of
back.
the country,
Yes.
right?
Yes, you are. So we'll be in touch.
Yes, we'll be in touch.
Definitely check out his show if you haven't.
Thank you. I usually end each of my episodes with this. I got it from like one of the disc jockeys from the 70s that inspired me. Why can't I think of his name? Frankie Crocker. And so I end my shows with this: dream those dreams and then man up and women up and live those dreams, because a life without dreams is black and white and the universe flows in technicolor and surround sound.
Nice.
Thank you.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So much.